Welcome to the Alternative Leader podcast. My name is Mary Williams and I'm the Mind Architect. I'm also founder of the Alternative Leader Academy and author of It Begins With You. This podcast is dedicated to inspiring the leaders of today to lead with intention, both in their personal and their professional lives. My guests from across the world share their challenges, their knowledge and their experiences so that we can learn from these powerful insights to help us lead with strength, determination and compassion. Welcome to the Alternative Leader podcast. My name is Mary Williams and I'm the Mind Architect. Today's guest is David Cann. David describes himself as a proud dad of two girls aged 20 and 15 and married to a very patient and loving wife for 21 years, and they also have a dog called Boo. David is managing director of Target Publishing, which is a publisher and an event organizer in the health, sport, leisure and education sectors. David was previously a board director and a shareholder of Market Link, and he became very unwell, and that unwellness caused him to make big changes in his life. And I'm going to allow David to talk to you about what those big changes were, because it led to very significant changes in both your personal and your business life, didn't it? So would you like to take us back to feeling unwell and describe that journey for our subscribers?
Yeah, I think that any business owner, puts a lot of pressure on themselves, particularly when they're starting up their business. And Target Publishing are now 20 years of age, but at about 10 years old, I began to feel unwell. No actual physical illness, but now what I recall is it was more kind of mental stress that I was putting myself on. And it kind of reaches a point where I saw lots of different kind of medical people. There's nothing physically wrong with me, but actually, I think it was the stresses of running a business over a long period of time with a lack of sleep. Basically, what happened, I reached a point where I became so unwell. My wife was effectively running the business, and I was kind of directing her. One day I rode back home, and there was this kind of moment where we both realised that actually, we'd got all the successes of life. We had some great children, had animals, but we built a bit of wealth, a nice house. But actually, that wasn't as important as having your health. And coming back one day to the house, we looked, it was a gardener and somebody doing the pool. And we both sat down and decided, actually, this is the turning point where we've got to change, our lives for the better. And that would mean downsizing in-house and actually creating a simpler life. And so we had a bit of a turning point there, but it had to take, sadly, ill health to actually make us realise that we've got to make that change.
Can I ask, if you don't mind, what sort of symptoms you were experiencing? Because I know that often when people are in that sort of high stress level, they don't recognise the symptoms that are mental stress. So would you mind sharing what they were?
Yeah, it's fine. They say that your body has got two brains. One is in your gut and one is in your head. And they call it the gut-brain axis, which again I've learned since. And effectively your brain will then control how you, and they call it your gut feel. And of course, when you are under stress and duress, your body, almost implodes. And where I felt my pain was in my stomach. So of course, exploratory things to do with my stomach. In fact, when they did all the medical examinations, there was nothing physically wrong, but actually I was feeling kind of pain in my stomach. So of course my brain, and ever since that, under certain stresses, your brain tells your stomach that is the part of your body that is ill, and yet there physically isn't anything else. So I suffered clearly brain fog, as you do when you're very stressed. You can't think clearly. I continually had stomach pain, which was effectively, my trigger, for telling me that I need to get off. And actually, winding forward the clock 10 years, since I was ill, I do know that if I do get that pain, that's the trigger for me to stop and think and reevaluate. So, if you get a positive out of a negative, that's the way I look at it now, that that's my trigger.
It's interesting you say that. I was giving a webinar on anxiety and stress, and one of the things I talked about was tells, like poker tells, and how it's really valuable to learn your own kind of tells. And I know for me, it's a shoulders up feeling, that I sort of notice the shoulders up and think, okay, hang on, what's going on with me? And so I think that, you've really highlighted a good piece of advice there, which is learn your tells.
Agree.
And so tell me a little bit more about this sort of epiphany that you had in the car. What was there, something someone said, or was it just a sudden realization of we shouldn't be doing this anymore?
It was driving back home and realizing that I hadn't picked the children up from school, that I had someone to kind of do the garden. Which sounds great, but actually, we can forget all that, because I think clearly what is important, is your health, and so the kind of changing point really was seeing other people that you were employing that actually you would really feel better doing yourself, and so that was the change that I wanted to make, is to simplify the business and to employ some good managers that could help run the business with some direction and input, and therefore, be able to, do the things that you felt guilty about. Pick up your child from school. And so, I hadn't done that for some years. And what I wanted to do was to ensure that, as with Megan and George, I had taken to nursery in the early days of the business. But that was very early in the morning. So at 7:30 in the morning, I was dropping them off at the kids' club, and then picking up potentially later on the day. But, over some years that had gone. My wife then took over that role, picking up and dropping off. And, I wanted to get the balance right.
And so how did you make that change? Because you were running a very significant company at that time, weren't you?
Yeah, a very successful business. A lot of people. But, we sat down, my wife and I sat down, and actually through all of this, we've become stronger. We know our strengths and weaknesses each. And really what this has done is highlighted, both of our strengths, and really we come to the conclusion that we need to simplify our lives, move to a different area, slightly further away from the business, which meant that I physically had to run the business more remotely, because the drive was an hour and a half each day. That to people who commuted London, is not a big ask, but for me, being 20 minutes away from the business, or being an hour and a half away from the business, it made me physically look at things differently, and that was to run the business more remotely. So we moved to Ely, simplified our house, got a smaller house, and and we began to enjoy that moment together as a family. And the business, whilst still important to us, we decided to put the family foremost, and our relationship and our partnership with our family foremost, and change. And so Ely was that big kind of moment for us to ensure that we were, I was able to drop off Megan at school daily. I was able to cycle her to school in the back of one of these little truck things, and pick her up at the end of the day, but equally run a business. And that was a good life balance change.
If you had advice for people who might find themselves where you were, what would your advice be for them?
I would say think. Give your time to think about what is important. An example of this is my daughter is a veterinary nurse. She's continued through COVID, obviously kind of helping animals that were sick. But the importance to her isn't necessarily money. I mean, important to her is that she's looking after animals and caring for them. And she's put this, and I think this is important, do what you feel you're happy, because ultimately, if money is important, and of course it does help, but I think if you enjoy what you do firstly, then I think you'll be more successful at it. So I think think about what you're doing, make some changes if you can, and go with it.
And do you think before this happened, do you think if you had sat and thought, can I make changes? Do you think you would have thought that you could make changes, or would you have felt? Because I guess what I'm thinking is I have quite a lot of clients who feel they're very stuck in that life. We spend this money, or this is happening. Do you think you would have had the same outlook before that?
No, I think you need a trigger to make you change. You know, and I think, my trigger was ill health, but actually I'm looking at it as a positive, because without that change and without that ill health, I would have not kind of hit that mark where I needed to make the change. It's a bit like COVID, isn't it? If you think today, in the last 10, 12 weeks, we've had to change. The change has been forced upon us, and so because of that, people think differently. From a personal experience of, we've thought to support, local shopping. Perhaps you may have done your Waitrose or Ocado shop or online shop, but also, actually, changing the way that you think. And we thought personally changing to buy, things more locally, and that will continue. So I think that we had a 12-week period of change, and I think that this COVID situation certainly made a lot of people change the mindset. As we were discussing recently, the article that came out recently about the survey that came out, about a third of people during COVID decided to make a dramatic change to their life, be it their work-life balance, or perhaps within the family, to consider family moreover, and that's because the situation has been forced upon us. So I think a negative out of a positive. It could be a negative situation, but look at things positively. As I say, we've recently introduced a 4-day week to Target, which we announced recently. The staff decided together that we would take a 20% pay cut for a period of time. This, over this period of time, 12 weeks, made me think about what could we do differently for this business, and spending time with friends and family, have an extended weekend. So Friday is the new Thursday, really, and so 4 days on and 3 days off, and received not only from the staff, but I posted this out on LinkedIn. We've had now nearly 2,000 LinkedIn viewings of that particular, and of course it's current, but what we wanted to do was to make that change and to shift the emphasis from work life balance, so that you have this a different balanced life. And I think this would be a positive, and of course the government are now looking at whether we should introduce a 4-day week. Personally, I'm in favour of it, because I do think, having experienced 10 years ago this work-life balancing, and now 10 years on, is able to kind of make the changes to Target to not just increase productivity, but just allow people just to be, for those 3 days, they're not in front of any emails or phones. They can probably relax, enjoy the time, and probably put more into a 5-day week than a 4-day week when they come back on Monday.
So that was the question I was going to ask you, is, so you've been running the 4-day week through the COVID period?
Yes.
And so how have you found the level of engagement and the level of productivity?
I mean, naturally in advertising, the advertising market has been affected because businesses have decided, or some businesses not decided to promote. But we're a bit like the stock market. We've got a lot of different sectors. So in the health sector, that's flown, of course, because of vitamin D and vitamin C and everything to do with your immune system. So that part of the business has flown. And so what we've found is that people did adjust to something that was thrown at us. We had to, all work from home. We had to work remotely through new technology. And so what it showed me is that how resilient people are to change. But it was only because that change was thrown at us that we had to make that change, which is a bit of an odd thing. But nonetheless, it showed me how resilient staff were. So, productivity was great. Camaraderie was there. We set up teams with Office on different groups of design, production, the whole company. We had a kind of quiz on a Friday afternoon, or Thursday actually, just before we broke up for the Friday, because we didn't. What I matched was a 4-day week, because we had a pay cut. We matched the 4-day to the 20%, pay cut. But that made me think differently, and that made me think that actually this could be our new normal.
And how has it been received by your employees?
No, I thought it was amazing. The emails that we received from employees that, and it's not necessarily, it's about, what they're going to do spending with their time, so the very personal emails that people have sent that have been very positive about it, how they may spend the weekend now going away at the weekend because they've got the Friday to be able to do that. But overall, very, very positive. I mean, so even part-timers, will gain that time as well by 20% less hours.
Right.
And of course, full-timers, 1 day less effectively. But, everyone's very positive, and it's. I think this is, certainly a decision that we've taken that I think will be not positive for our company, but also people's families as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's interesting. I've seen, a lot of my clients who are commuting an hour and a half a day have just said, well, actually, I don't want to do that anymore. At the moment, I can sort of get up and either go out to a garden office or my study. And, I literally have breakfast and 5 minutes later, I'm at my desk. And then at, 6 o'clock when I finish, even though they're still working really long working day, actually they're stopping and having, lunch with their family. And then immediately, into an evening with their family. And they're all saying there's actually no reason for me to be in the office at all. And so I can see that we may well, stay with that. And also obviously looking at organizations' expenses, actually you then don't have to have such a big building and all of those expenses that you normally have. So I do think it's going to be quite fascinating to see how it changes the world of work. I don't know sort of what your opinion is on that.
Yeah, I think, it's the headline I put on my post was actually time for change, and I think that is true. We need to kind of work in a different way, and there's time to think about the way in which we should be working, and could we be more productive in a shorter week? I think will be born true. And I read an article, American company that decided to do this some years ago. And, the productivity, the teamwork, everything has grown within that business because of this balance. And I think it's a fine balance, of course, and some businesses may not be able to do that, but they could potentially reduce the hours in which people work. So you're still working over a 5-day period. Perhaps it's a shorter day. So perhaps, you could finish at 4 p.m. where, or 3:30, say, where you can pick up your children from school, or drop your children off at school. Instead of breakfast club, you can have breakfast at home, enjoy that time together in the garden, or just together, and so it's just, so it's not necessarily 4-day week. It's about, that time. How can you spend that time differently? And be as productive in a shorter week.
And just going back to your illness, how did that change affect your family and your balance when you sort of downsized? But obviously you were still MD. So how did you find that transition? How did that work for you?
I think certain. I think for a family, from running a business to be a dad and a family man, or a mother, an MD of a business, what's important, what we've learned, is to be open and truthful with your family. So look, Dad's not that great. We need to kind of do things differently. We need to change the way in which we're doing things. And so we need to move. We need to, not have the swimming pool and the tennis court, all that good stuff. That wasn't important anymore. What was important is that we could sit down, and I think Megan was just 5 years of age and George was 10 at that time. And so, we had the ability to kind of sit down, have a chat to them, be open about, our change and our move, and accept, and I think that was the biggest thing for me, is about acceptance. If you do need to change the structure or the business or how you're spending your life, make the decision, accept it, and move on.
And how did the children adjust, if you don't mind me asking?
They loved it. They loved it. Living in a city in Ely, a lovely city, being able to cycle and walk around the golf course with a dog, and so it was a kind of, if it's a spiritual thing, it's a very enlightening thing. Not very spiritualist, but that's what it was. It was a change that lifted us, and a different house in a different city, running our lives differently, but more together, was a really important change.
Oh, that's lovely. Did the children actually sort of mention the fact that you were then around more and present? Was that something they sort of
they remember it. Kids do remember, and it's enabled us to you can run a business, can't you, sometimes, I think, and just leave things behind, and you can run a successful business, but it's about being successful in business, but it is also remembering what you enjoy most. And family and friends are key. So I think keeping that in check whilst running a business, is important. So yes, they do remember it, and but they remember the times that together. I mean, you and I met on a train some years ago, and I was taking Megan to London for a trip in London, and to see the things that my father had shown me, the change in the guard, and Buckingham Palace, and all the Madame Tussauds, and all the lovely sights of London. And it was an important time for Megan and me that I felt pretty connected, that we could spend this time doing this together. And that's where you and I met. I think you'd overheard a conversation that we were discussing why we were doing that, and that my dad used to take me, and I was trying to do some very similar things with Megan that my father had done with I for my birthday. And I think that's how we first met. And,
yes, it is. Yes.
But it's key. And Megan remembers those times. And when I mentioned that we were meeting, she remembered that moment on the train that, we had a brief discussion, So
that's really lovely. She remembers.
Yeah, she does, yeah.
So thinking about moving forwards, do you feel that you've sort of got it, and I use the term lightly, but sort of right now, your balance?
Yeah, I think so. Life is about trying to keep that in check. And of course, life's not perfect. So of course you do go down dark alleys sometimes, but I think what it's about is recognising you're going down that dark alley potentially again, recognising that situation and coming back into, what works best. And what works best is keeping the work-life balance in check, and ensuring that, you're not spending disproportionate amount of time doing the wrong things. And, I think this 10-year gap where, this moment, that I decided that needed to change things, gives you, I think, a marker. And on that marker, you recognise that later on in life that, potentially if you're crossing that line again, you recognise when that line is crossed or about to be crossed. And you can adapt and change again. So I think all these experiences that you have, running a business and with family and a business, it's important to kind of, keep things, in check. And, had we not gone back in that moment 10 years ago, I would have not had that marker today where I can realise that actually we need to get things back in check again.
I remember one of the stories that you were telling me was you were saying how even if somebody contacted you and said, I can only speak to you as a, business to business only on Thursday night, if you'd already got a sort of date night planned with your wife, you'd just be saying, no, I'm sorry, I'm busy on Thursday. And you just were quite strict on that. Is that something you're still quite strict on?
I think keeping, I can be at fault. I can be at fault with, my phone, because sadly that's an extension, and I think most people have, emails and phone and all sorts of things. But, what we've decided now with family time, is when I'm at home, I can put the phone down. But if we're on holiday, that now goes in a safe. So I come and check it at lunchtime and check it in the evening. And that's, it's healthy for everybody. It's healthy for families, certainly healthy for employees if I'm not on it all the time. So I think you're right. Date nights are important. Leave your phone at home. If someone wants to get hold of you, tell them where you're going to be. They can always get hold of you.
And my question to be is, people who are listening to this thinking, gosh, I really wish I could make that change, but I'm so worried about the effect on my business. What's been the effect on your business of making that change over the last 10 years?
I think it's allowed the business to flourish. I think it's allowed people, employees who become kind of friends, really. Some people have been with me now 17, 18 years, that it enables them to run their own business within their business. There's certain checks that you need to do and stuff, of course, but my recommendation would be make the change. It would be get it in balance. Just spend some time, think about what you want out of your life, not necessarily your business. Because if you want more life, family life, friend time, the only way you can do that is to change. And so I would certainly recommend making that change.
And do you miss the sort of tennis courts and the gardener and things like that?
I do drive past that house sometimes, and I sit outside and I just look at it, but no, I've got no regrets. And life is about no regrets. That was a moment in our life that we'd experienced, but that enabled us to get on to somewhere else. And so I think whilst it's important to have those memories, and so, for example, Megan and George, both of them separately, I've driven past the house. They've asked to go past it as a memory, and the same with Ely. We've done the same, driven past Ely, but that's great because they've got fond memories, and I think these are positive memories that they've got. They could have remembered my illness over that period of time, but they didn't. They just remembered the times that we had, and that we carried that on.
Oh, that's really lovely. Well, there's 3 questions that I ask all guests. And so my first question is, thinking about that sort of time where you decided to change everything and to kind of uproot and move, is there a sort of, obviously it was very challenging for you. So is there a sort of a book, a film or a piece of music or something that has sort of helped you transition through that time, sort of seemed to make it easier, or just sort of really sung out to you?
Well, yeah, somebody recommended a book which was very apt at the time and still now, really, and it's the book called Power of Now. And it's, again, quite a spiritualist book, but it's written by a guy called Eckhart Tolle, a German guy, and it's about living in the now. There's not a lot you can do about the future because you don't know quite what the future is, and not a lot of point looking back because you can't do anything about what's happened. So it's about living in the now, and that book, has got certain elements to it that I think are really important, and of course, that kind of triggers certain things to me when I think about, getting the work-life balance again. Just think about the now.
Okay, lovely. It's a great book, absolutely. Yeah, brilliant recommendation. And so my second question would be, what would be your kind of key takeaway for our subscribers today? Something that they can either think or do literally today. What would you say?
Well, one of the quotes, within that book that I kind of carry is about accept and then act, And so I would say that, think about, what you really want, and, but do something about it. If you don't act, you'll never know quite what the difference would be to running a business. So I would certainly say, get some time to think about what you really fundamentally want and then do it.
Accept, then act.
Accept and act.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, my final question to you is, if you were standing in front of the sort of world leaders of today, what would you say?
Not very political for me. I'm not very political, but this work-life balance, I think, is key. It's about your well-being, about your mental health. So I would say, to governments across, if there was a way in which you could shift the emphasis away from, standard hours and to, insist that's the way it's done. Just think how you could change or make the change of people's working lives. Everyone, hopefully your subscribers today, would listening in would say, actually, I'd like to change, but if government make the change, then that would make everyone's life easier to act, because then it's almost a bit like COVID. Sadly, it's forced on you, and then you have to act. So I would, I certainly relish the opportunity to try and change government by recommendation, a kind of a shorter week, just to increase people's mental health and well-being, and get work-life balance in check.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think if we look at the research and all of the companies that have done it, actually productivity often escalates up and above what it was when people were working 5 days a week. So the evidence is there, isn't it, if people want to look for it?
It is. It's just a matter of making that change. I'll say just a matter. Certain industries may not be able to do this 4-day week because they have to deliver on a Friday, ready for the weekend, and deliveries to people. But it may well be that they can just change the hours. But just a small change can make an awful lot of difference, I think. And I'm sure business leaders would see an uplift in productivity. That change be made.
And we know also that it enhances retention as well, which obviously saves lots of costs of rehiring and retraining too. So
yeah, there is about that. It's even this small post that I put on LinkedIn, we've had employees that have left us and gone off to Pastors View, which is great. But also commented back on that post by saying, ahead of the game, or so it's great to still keep those people within the family of Target Publishing, and for them to still look out for the company. But it is about change, and I think change can be a positive experience, and it doesn't have to be a negative thing. And I think if you make those changes, however small they are, it's good.
It's a big thing. David, thanks so much for coming on and sharing. I always found your story very sort of inspirational, so I was really keen for you to come on and share kind of all of what you've learnt. With those coming up behind you might be stuck in the same sort of patterns, and I hope that they've taken a lesson from what you've talked about today, and that maybe other
Thank
companies.
You for having me on as well, and I hope your subscribers enjoyed what we've talked about today.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant, and hopefully more will take on your sort of 4-day working week idea.
Well, let's hope.
Lovely. Thanks so much, and lovely to speak to you. Thank you.
You too. Pleasure.
Hi, I'm Mary Williams, as you know, and thank you so much for listening to the Alternative Leader podcast. I search for guests to bring you lessons and learnings that can help move you forward in your life, help you achieve the success that you want to, in whatever way that shows up for you, to help you lead powerfully, whether that's in your own life, as your parenting, your personal, or your professional, and make you the best that you can be. If you've enjoyed the show, please rate and review it, and please share it with as many people as you think also want to move forward and gain success in their lives. If you want to find out more about me, go over to my website, which is www.mary-williams.com. That's www.mary, which is MARI-williams.com, and you'll find links to all of my social media profiles there. There's also a Facebook community that you can join, and again, all the links will be on the website too. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic day, and thank you so much for listening.